It's 6 p.m., so I will call to order our EDA work session of April 17th, 2023. And we have one agenda item today, which is the presentation of business assistance analysis and recommendations by Consultant John Stark. I will pass it over to Community Development.
Great, thank you. So, hi, which one are you looking for?
I think it might be over here. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So this is the final presentation of John's work that he's been doing for us for the last probably 6 months now. Yep, and as a reminder, this is an evaluation of our existing business programming and then a survey and evaluation of what other communities do and how we might want to tweak the programming that we have and expand on that with our new economic development manager who is here tonight to meet everyone. This is Jan Youngquist.
Hello.
And we'll talk more with Jan later, but right now I'm just going to turn it over to John for his presentation.
Thank you. So, thank you, commissioners. It's great to see you again. If you recall, I was here in January. And so some of this presentation is just a reminder of what we talked about in January. So I'll go through the first 8 or 10 slides pretty quick. So just reminding you that, the EDA has been a group for, since 2017 is when it was authorized. The EDA had been stockpiling some funding its first few years for business assistance. Once the EDA was ready to roll out a lot of these programs, COVID came along. And so really all your energies and funding were dominated by pandemic relief. So this is an ideal time to evaluate business assistance programming. Just a reminder, the budget has consistently been about $100,000 for business assistance. And the EDA fund balance as of the beginning of January was $984,000 plus. And I talked about a reserve there, but I'll get back to that. What the business assistance programming currently is, and I'll go through these real quick. Open to business, the EDA, this actually predates the EDA, it's been going on since 2012, and it's technical assistance for entrepreneurs, growing businesses. The EDA pays $6,200 a year to provide this service. Well, Hennepin County's provided us with a $6,200 grant. That's pretty convenient. But there's been staffing turnover in Open to Business, and then Elevate Hennepin County, is really kind of taking on the role that Open to Business has had in the past, and they're incorporating Open to Business into their program. Bike rack cost sharing, again, that predates the EDA. It's a very small program. It got a grant from the statewide health improvement program. It's funded 7 bike racks at local businesses and has funds remaining for 4 to 8 more bike racks. And I would anticipate you guys will do one every year or two, and as projects come in that look appropriate. The Energy Efficient Business Grant was created in 2020. Businesses are eligible for a reimbursement of up to $2,500 in eligible energy upgrades. And it leverages utility company refunds that they provide to their customers, and it reduces the carbon footprint of the community. It's administered externally at no cost to the EDA by the Center for Energy and Environment. That's been $20,000 a year this last 3 years, and it usually funds 11 to 14 UC businesses. So it's been a very good program for the EDA. Displaced Business Grant, up to $3,600 per business being displaced as a result of city and HRA redevelopment. This was utilized less than anticipated, and if you revisit this, you can talk about why that was. The revolving loan program, this was something that was approved but never implemented due to the pandemic kind of taking over and halting this. The intention was to fund it $60,000 annually, 4 to 12 loans of anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 per business. We had worked out with the Minnesota Consortium of Community Developers that they were going to administer this for us, but all the people we worked with on that have since moved on. And when I say we, I guess I mean you, sorry. COVID, I know you are all very proud of the work you did with COVID. Those of you that were on the EDA at the time, 63 loans issued to 55 businesses. Just a great benefit to the community. It's just kind of interesting to see kind of who received the loans. 19% to restaurants, 16% to retail, fitness providers, healthcare related issues or uses. So that's all pretty normal. The 44%, I say to a wide variety of businesses. If you ever get a chance, look at the list, and Melissa can get that for you. It's just amazing the breadth of businesses, of small businesses that are going on in the community that you really never think about or know about. As I said, this is an opportunity to reset and reevaluate. There's been some changes to staffing, several new EDA commissioners, and a lot of the programs, as I talked about, have changed since then. So it's just the time to look. And with the Jan coming in as the new economic development manager, this is really the first time the city has had an employee with economic development in their title in this way, as a management employee. So it's just gonna be great for the businesses in the community, and I know staff here is really excited for Jan to start. Types of business assistance programs. Went through this last time. It's in the report. I'm not going to read through these for you. We'll touch on. Did kind of go through all of the peer cities, the cities that were similar to Ridgefield. I identified 17 of them and really looked at what they were doing, what they started to do and found it was not working. Tried to learn as much from peer businesses as I could. There's an appendix in the report that was given to you that gives you as much of the peer city information as I could put together. And I would say Ridgefield is doing as much or more than 75% of the peer cities. And the cities that are doing more than you would expect to do more. They're larger cities. So this is where we left off last time. We had just closed the small business survey and we didn't know what the results looked like. So Melissa and I and communications employee put together a survey for businesses. We marketed over a 6-week period, and we tried to get it out as broadly as we could to a diverse group of businesses. In the end, we got 21 respondents. A couple of things that jump out. First of all, 90% of the respondents identified as being either a woman or a minority-owned business. Just phenomenal. And that reinforces what a lot of us already know about entrepreneurial development, that it is more likely to be women and minority. And the word minority doesn't feel like a good word. That's the word that's used. But that's who are out there really starting up businesses from scratch. And then 24% of them were home-based businesses. And that, going back to the pandemic relief, a lot of those businesses were also home-based, more so than I would have anticipated. We asked them to rank 11 criteria about the community. 9 of them, people ranked as either very good or best. And so people are satisfied with Ridgefield, businesses are, by and large. There were very few things, only 2 of the criteria were, bad or not as good as, I don't remember the terminology. The biggest concern is the cost of space to lease or buy. That will be a recurring theme. There's strong support for financial assistance for interior improvements and equipment and for technical assistance. In the past, there had been some funding for exterior improvements. But what we learned from both the survey and from and I'll talk about it in a minute, the Small Business Forum, and what we learned in the past, so many businesses in Ridgefield don't own the real estate that they're in. So to have money for exterior improvements doesn't always help the business. Kind of medium support on financial assistance for exterior improvements or signage, for ongoing operating costs, and for energy efficient improvements. And then low support for help finding employees. That might, I'm sure that's a function of the hiring environment we're in. And then kind of low support for visits from city council and our staff. I hope nobody feels like, oh, they don't want to see us, they don't want to hear from us. But you know, they just want to go on about their lives and businesses. Then I hosted a small business advisory forum in this room. We had 10 participants representing 7 businesses and a participant representing the EDA and Commissioner Hansen. They talked about positive aspects of the Richfield business climate. Businesses support each other. They felt really strongly about that they knew other businesses kind of market one another, help each other out. The city and its leaders were universally viewed as being helpful. The diversity of the community was viewed as a positive aspect of the community. The city events and communications, the city tries to include as many people as possible in those, and then just our general community desire to support local businesses. You know, there were all these recurring stories about, you know, customers coming in and telling them, you know, that they knew that they could get the products cheaper elsewhere, but it had value to them to support a Richfield business. Some areas that have, you know, potential for improvement, things that could be better. They'd like to see more collaboration among businesses, so not necessarily something under your control, maybe something you can help with. More diversity of businesses who participate. And the feeling there from the group was, you know, when there are Chamber of Commerce get-togethers or when there are kind of business forums, that it is, they're not seeing the diversity of participants that they think reflects the diversity of businesses in the community. And, you know, they would like to find ways of having a bigger tent, bringing more people in. Streamlining city processes. You know, it's felt like there are some hoops to jump through in city processes. And they mentioned kind of having a central resource, a person that they could call who wouldn't necessarily know all the answers, but could steer them and say, hey, you know, here's who you might want to talk to. Here's, yeah. There was a lot of talk about communications and using the city and the city's Facebook page as marketing resources for local businesses. You know, I'm sure that there are some legal challenges in doing that. So that, you know, you would have to work out how that would be possible. But I think that there are opportunities to say, you know, this business is having a grand opening. I think there are all kinds of things you can say without being, you know, having a favoritism for certain businesses. So I do think that that's something that there could be improvement to. Older buildings need work and investment, and newer buildings are too expensive. This, I have this last in this list, but this was the biggest thing. You know, it's the space. The new space is great. We can't afford it. The old space is really run down, has really some structural problems, ADA problems, all kinds of problems. The negative aspect of the Richfield business climate were excessive paperwork and processes for city approvals. There was a feeling that the taxes are high when compared to Bloomington. And then a challenging availability of parking for home-based businesses.
I'm curious on those last items. Are those a perception issue, or is that true? Like, particularly if I wanted to open a restaurant, are there more forms and more steps here than in Bloomington? And I don't think taxes are higher. I think taxes are higher, but
I don't know for a fact.
okay.
I believe because people were using generalities. People were saying, well, taxes are higher here. And I challenged them. I said, well, higher than where? And, you know, I really pushed them. And people that did business in both cities felt like they were higher in Bloomington. And my recollection from my time here is that the general tax rate is higher in Richfield than in Bloomington.
Okay. I'm also, yeah, I am curious about the people working steps, and I guess it would be, I mean, you don't need to answer right now, but just in general, I actually don't know if I wanted to open a restaurant in Richfield, like what are all the things I'd have to do?
Well, Richfield's, in terms of restaurants, we share health inspections and things like that with Bloomington, so it's exactly the same.
Okay.
In terms of land use approvals, I think in general we're pretty similar to Bloomington. It could be something to look into, but I don't think we're drastically more.
And it may likely be just that when you ask somebody, what do you think about government? The answer is always,
Yeah.
taxes are too high and it's too complicated.
Yeah. But I would be curious if cities have a really like streamlined, like exact step-by-step thing for, you know, many of these entrepreneurs are not familiar and haven't done this yet.
Well, my curiosity on that with the higher taxes thing is if they have a bigger commercial base, it might be spread out over a bigger area. That would be the only thing that it'd be interesting to find out if that's what it is or if it's just a perception.
Yeah, because I mean, Bloomington's getting taxes from the Mall of America, and I mean, they're the hotels, and they've got a completely different tax base.
And I don't want you to focus too much on this. I really had to pull negatives out of them. You know, there was a place on the whiteboard that says, you know, positives, things that can be improved, and negatives, and I really had to pull them out of them. And so nobody felt strongly about any of these negatives, to be honest.
And, you know, just to follow up on the paperwork and things like that, we are making process improvements. I mean, I think that everyone who works at the city realizes that some of our technology is behind. We're making significant investments there. We realize that we need to work smarter, not harder. Our staff is overwhelmed. So we are working on those process things. So I think all the things that are listed here are things that we're aware of and we'll continue to work on.
And every city kind of licenses its businesses differently. And so in one city, you know, a certain type of business might need a license, and in another city they don't, and vice versa for some other type of business. And it's so much of its history. You know, in 1997 there was some issue with a massage therapist that resulted in this, you know, process and this procedure in Richfield, and in 1998 there was this issue in Bloomington with something else, you know, and so, you know, I think that's as much of what they were talking about as anything. Like I said, I wouldn't put too much on that. I think the positives were what people really wanted to talk about, and while we all appreciate hearing the positives, we were looking to pull up some more constructive things. And the centerpiece, what could be improved upon, I think there are a lot of building blocks there.
Can you talk a little bit, so as we look at the collaboration amongst businesses, I think most people think of the Chamber of Commerce as kind of being that resource. As I read through your report, there wasn't a lot of information about the partnership between the Chamber of Commerce and the EDA or the city. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about that. And is there a reason that, are people not joining the chamber in that same way, or is that not the goal of the chamber?
Well, a couple of things, and I didn't, I don't think I included this in the report, but at one point in time, the city paid for a portion of the Chamber of Commerce's staffing. That went away in the early 2000s with budget issues at the city. So the city was, you know, financially participating in the chamber. Historically, you know, the chamber hasn't, and I don't know the numbers, so this is more kind of my observations as an employee here. The chamber hasn't done a great job of bringing in a diverse, you know, ethnically diverse group of folks, or a of some of the smaller businesses. You know, every real estate office is a member, every financial institution is a member. A lot of kind of what you would consider traditional businesses, maybe that's a better way of saying it. A lot of traditional businesses are in the chamber. A lot of non-traditional businesses are not. And I think that there are some opportunities to strengthen the relationship with the chamber and to provide them with some resources that would help both the city and the chamber. They struggle. They struggle with staffing. They struggle with membership. And so opportunities to help each other, I think, are there.
Are they considered a privately owned for-profit business, the chamber, or are they
They're a,
when we think about partnering with them, right? I think like that's where my question
I
stems
think they are
from.
equivalent of a
they're a
nonprofit.
nonprofit.
They're a nonprofit, okay.
Yeah, and the city over the years has been either a voting board member or a non-voting board member. It's kind of varied over the years whether it's a voting position or not.
It looks like Simon but maybe not as a council member, maybe from his own businesses on their board.
He was appointed by the council.
He was appointed by the council, okay. And then also the city manager.
Right, and I usually attend those meetings as well as a non-voting member. I think that in recent past, we have made a concerted effort to strengthen that relationship. Some of the things that we've been talking about, and Jan will start attending these meetings too, is how we can help filter businesses or make them aware of the chamber. And so something that we're starting to do is when a new business is approved through their land use approvals or building permits, is just adding something on the bottom that says Richfield has a chamber. Here's how you get in touch with them. So working on some of those things. And they do have a new executive director. Kelsey's been there maybe two years, maybe a little more. And she's doing a great job of recruiting new members and going out and meeting with new businesses as they come into the community. So I think it's on the upswing.
Just seems like we have a lot of shared goals and wanting businesses to thrive in Richfield, so.
And yet I think a lot of times it's one of those complicated issues where it's like theoretically the business say, boy, I wish there was more communication, more collaboration. And then yet a lot of times business operators, particularly the small business, they are so stretched in time and resources.
Right.
That then when it comes time to like going to a meeting and taking time away from their business, it's hard to do.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, when we went through and did our liaisons, we appointed Simon as the liaison, but I don't know if he pays for his membership or if the city pays, to be honest with you. So maybe he's doing double duty, so we have to clarify that. I don't want to put false information out.
You know, Commissioner Hansen was a driving force behind the Penn Central Business Group. And my recollection when the group was meeting is that very few of those people were in the chamber. And we're happy that there was this other group that didn't charge dues, was a big part of it. That would kind of take on their interest. And I don't know what the dues are of the chamber and how they compare.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hansen, is the Richmond Central still
Uh,
active?
it's still there, but we really haven't been as active in
Okay.
recent times.
Are there other business groups at that? Okay, just curious. Yeah,
Can I ask a follow-up on that? You referred to like the Twin Cities Latino Chamber. And so I know there's not specific smaller ones in Richfield, but do we have a lot of people that are participating in these bigger umbrella regional groups?
I believe in the Twin Cities Economic Development Council. So even in that community, in the Latino community, there are kind of two competing groups. The Twin Cities Economic Development Council and the Twin Cities Latino Chamber of Commerce. In my communications, I'd had more of a relationship with the Latino Economic Development Council, and it seemed like they had more of a kind of a inroads into Richfield. But I think all of these groups are really viable groups to partner with. So the recommendations from the Small Business Advisory Forum were to continue to provide technical assistance like Open to Business had been in the past and Elevate HC will be in the future. To improve and update the city's website with regards to business resources. To provide forgivable loans instead of grants. They talked about this a bit, that they love the idea of grants, just giving businesses money, but they like the idea of loans better. Like a loan that would be forgiven in 20% a year over 5 years or 10% a year over 10 years, because it rewards the business for remaining in the community. To provide forgivable loans for improvements to older buildings, and then operational loans for new buildings. Specifically for non-chain businesses, I think that it gets a little harder to manage and administer when you're saying this kind of business but not this kind. I'm sure that there are ways around it, but that's it's a complexity. Having a single city point person for businesses to contact with questions for guidance. They talked about the city creating a small business Facebook page, and maybe the city's just kind of hosting it, or it'd almost be like the community page, but just related to businesses, where residents could post their positive experiences, and businesses could post promotions and job openings. Commercial realtors could post properties for sale or for lease. So that was one of their ideas. They really liked getting together and talking. I think that they were able to inform one another, and they thought it would be a good idea to convene a group like that several times a year. And then the creation of a locally owned business directory would be good. So this is a long list, but when I sat down and looked at the survey results, what I heard from the Small Business Forum, what I heard from you at the first work session, what I saw other cities were doing well, what I saw other cities struggled with, what were the desired outcomes of business assistance in Richfield to mitigate the negative impacts of commercial gentrification. Whether that's the wording or not, that's the thing I heard over and over and over again, was this idea that with all the redevelopment, Richfield's becoming a much more attractive place to be. It's harder for businesses to, as I said, afford new locations, but the remaining locations are getting more deteriorated.
Can you elaborate on that? Is the negative impacts of commercial gentrification just the cost of rent ownership, or are there other negative impacts of commercial gentrification?
The cost is what I was hearing. Yep. And it's two things. It's the cost, but also it's elimination of viable spaces. When the project at 65th and Lindale came in, it's a great project, providing all kinds of things, but that's that many square feet of commercial space that are gone. Some of it was replaced, some of it was not. And as when a redevelopment project comes along, for it to be a redevelopment TIF district, they have to be blighted in substandard buildings. And so you're taking out, poorer quality oftentimes of commercial space, but that's very affordable space as well. To find a way to assist commercial tenants, not just commercial property owners, is important. To improve the interiors of commercial spaces in addition to their curb appeal. To provide technical assistance to small and emerging businesses. And actually, instead of reading through this, these all have their heading on a little further down. But I think then, those are my ideas about the desired outcomes. I think for you all to buy into that is important, and staff. And I think this is a great starting point, and that this is something you should revisit every year, every 18 months, and say, are these still the outcomes we want, and how can we achieve each one of these? And that's what I'll go through in a second, is some ideas on ways to achieve them. These options are meant to be the ideas to explore and build upon. They're not like, oh, I recommend you do X, Y, and Z, because you've got a great staff here that knows the community and knows what their capacity is, what their time availability is. And as I said, I think it'd be a good idea to revisit these things every 18 months or so. So just going through them, mitigating the negative impacts of commercial gentrification. I'm not going to go through every option. Maybe I'll just touch on a couple of things. Here, provide forgivable lease assistance funds to existing businesses whose rents have been increased or moved into newly redeveloped sites with higher rents. That's an idea. There are a few other ideas there. Oh, and I will say there is a group called the Small Business Anti-Displacement Network. They've got a very good website, and they deal with this throughout the country, this very issue of kind of commercial gentrification. Assisting commercial tenants regardless of whether they own or the space they occupy or not. And this would be providing forgivable loan funds to tenants for interior improvements, fixtures, signage, other tenant improvements, not just the exterior shell of the building. Providing access to technical assistance programs like Elevated Hennepin County. Looking at the city's business licensing fees periodically to make sure that they're competitive, exactly what you're asking about. Are we really more expensive than Bloomington? Are we more expensive than Minneapolis? Looking at that
But you
on
don't have
occasion.
those numbers.
I don't, as part of this. I do know, on some of those, public safety has looked into those in the past. Some of the restaurant licensing and alcohol compliance licensing, I know that they have, and those may be available through them.
I will just mention that we did lower our alcohol fee quite a bit recently, and we were like double most of the other cities, so.
Yeah,
But we
so
haven't looked at the other fees really in the same detail.
improving the structural and internal components of the commercial spaces. And some of these kind of overlap. Communicate with, so Hennepin County has a what's called business district initiative that Richfield was able to get grant funds from, but it specifically talks about the exteriors of buildings. And so maybe working with Hennepin County to talk about how their funds can be used for interiors, because in a city like Richfield, that's really proving to be as or more important. ADA, improving physical accessibility in commercial properties, that might be something worth public expenditure. Provide small and emerging businesses with a source of technical assistance to help them launch or grow again. This Elevate Hennepin County, I do think it's going to be just a great program. I think they found all the best parts of open to business and expanded upon them, and then brought open to business in as kind of team members. There are other groups. There's a group called SCORE that is, retired business people that are able to be kind of mentors for small and emerging businesses. So again, just making sure you've got some options to look at for providing this technical assistance. One of the things we talked about in January was the sewer access charge. You can adopt a program to defer those. My personal opinion after looking at other cities is if you adopt this, you might do one a year, two a year. So not a lot of benefit, On the other hand, not a lot of cost. It's pretty easy to put together the program. Support existing businesses and reward their commitment to the community. As I talked about, providing assistance as forgivable loans. I would also say that when I spoke with the city attorney about what we're doing here, they felt much more comfortable with the EDA providing loans than the EDA providing grants in terms of how the state statutes are written. Celebrate businesses. Is there a way for the EDA to celebrate businesses? Business of the year, or this business has been here for 50 years. With the city, we have those programs for employees. Once you're here 25 years, you get recognized. So some ways of recognizing the businesses. I do think it'd be a good idea to get a better understanding of the number of home-based businesses in the community and what their wants and needs are. That's just kind of something that this study didn't really get into, but I think that would be a good step for you to take in the future. And then consider tenure in the community as a criteria when you score. You've got programs to say, well, it's a competitive thing. Your tenure in the community is going to help with your score. Foster a great relationship with the local business community. This is something, again, I heard from the Small Business Forum and kind of through the survey. Jan's here now. Have her serve as that point of contact for businesses. Continue to play an active role at the chamber. Spanish-speaking resources are important. Small Business Advisory Forum. One idea would be to create a business association grant program. I don't know, $20,000 to similar to what the Richfield Foundation does or the city does with social service funding, where people, groups, the Richfield Chamber of Commerce, the Latino Economic Development Council could apply for this funding and say what they're going to do with it, how it's going to help Richfield residents. So an opportunity for you to help each other and to strengthen those relationships. Communicate to and about Richfield's business community. For the economic development staff and the communications staff to get together and think about how they can do this, what they can promote about businesses, and how they can help spread the word. Communicating city information to businesses. A long time ago when I first started here, there was a written, quarterly newsletter that went out called Your Business. That the city would send out every 3 months to every business in the community. Maybe there is an email subscription, kind of a thing like that once or twice a year, businesses get some handy information about, what's happening with city fees or whatever kind of topical information there is. And then provide residents with information about businesses located in the city from, and we've talked about that a little bit already. Leverage external resources. There are a lot of economic development groups out there that really want to help, and they're looking for ways to help. So nurture and maintain good working relationships with staff and policymakers at granting agencies and other economic development groups. To me, Hennepin County is really a great source of grant funding and of assistance for economic development. So making sure that they continue to meet with the Hennepin County staff once or twice a year, just so they don't forget about Richfield. Hennepin County, the funds that they have for assisting specify is for assisting suburban Hennepin County. And so their funds don't go to assisting the city of Minneapolis. It's Richfield competing against the Robbinsdales and the Golden Valleys of the world. And so making sure, like I said, that Richfield's not forgotten. participate in all levels of Elevate Hennepin. They've Elevate Hennepin, I know I've talked about it a few times, and if you get a chance, go to their website and take a look at that. But they've got, there's a level that's free, and then there are 2 levels that they charge cities for participating in. The charge, in my mind, was fairly minimal. I don't remember it offhand, it's in the report.
It was 5,000 a year.
For
the
each-
base level. Yep, and we are paying for that. We talked about that real early in the year, or at the end of 2022, so we are members.
Yeah, and I think it's money well spent. Commit to a staff goal of submitting at least 1 external grant application for business assistance a year. You know, you can't win if you don't try, you know? And so just continually making those efforts. Determining whether any new or existing programs can be administered by nonprofit organizations. And there's some information in the report about who some of these external providers are. You know, quite frankly, they service loans better than a city staff person could. And, you know, in terms of like volume, for city staff to administer 2 or 3 loans that come out a year, where this other nonprofit organization is doing it for bunches of cities, where they're doing 30, 50, 100 a year, where they've got processes down, it just makes sense. Continue to utilize Center for Energy and Environment for the Energy Efficient Business Program. And then I talked about this before, the Business Association Grant Program. And then achieve other goals beyond economic development. You know, examples are with the Energy Efficient Business Program, reducing carbon emissions, develop a policy or guidelines for electric vehicle charging stations with incentives for commercial properties, finding ways to promote alternate forms of transportation through the EDA business assistance, supporting the creation of new affordable housing, you know, housing, workforce housing, and the workforce obviously go hand in hand. And then evaluate business assistance programs and policies through a lens of supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know that's something that's important in the city of Richfield. That's one of the reasons why I continue to want to help the city of Richfield in any way I can. It's important to me as well. Provide a measurable impact to the community and its businesses. Collect data on recipients of business assistance programming, so it'll be possible to ensure that the programs are being used equitably in meeting their intended goals. So in the past, we really haven't done that, haven't collected that data. And working with the CEE on their energy efficient grant, just learning more about it. You know, what's the carbon footprint impact? What external funds are leveraged, so you can tell the story about why this is important and what you're accomplishing. And attempting to set specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely goals for the programs. And then maintaining a sustainable local funding for economic development. The revolving loan fund, you know, one option would be to continue to defer that and focus on some of these other things. There didn't seem to be as much of a demand for that through what I've learned in the community. Maintaining a cash reserve of 35 to 40% of the annual expenditures, and the report gives some very specific numbers that Melissa can use when the budget time comes. Maximize the EDA levy by setting it at the highest amount that can be justified. You know, every year through the budget process, the EDA has a ceiling, and you know, just thinking about how to use that money to the best you can. Maintaining 200,000 to 300,000 within the EDA's fund balance for unforeseen opportunities. One of the things in the report when I talk about external funding, like the State Department of Employment and Economic Development, they're a great asset that we've never used. Or haven't used very frequently. It's because they really concentrate on big projects. And when these big projects come along, they'll look to a city and say, hey, we are going to participate, but we need you to throw in a couple of $300,000 to make this work, to have that funding there in case something you just hadn't anticipated comes along. And then this gets kind of into sausage making, but the energy efficient grant program, you know, as the program has been successful, there are going to be fewer and fewer people remaining that need the funding. So as some of these other programs come along, maybe reducing the funding to that program. That was a lot of me talking, sorry. The report is, you know, pretty thorough, pretty lengthy. This was kind of a superficial look at it. So hopefully you've had a chance to at least flip through that. Where there's some things we wanted to.
I have a question. So, you know, as we think about the EDA's budget and where it comes from, right? It is taxes from residents and businesses. What I feel like is missing in here that I still don't understand is like what the community needs are, not just from small business owners and business owners, but what businesses do the community feel is lacking in our area to bring in, and would we want to support those more than others, right? To fulfill a need. I know we've talked a lot about breweries and over the many years. I hear anecdotally about small business restaurants and cafes and those kind of spaces are needed, but do we have any actual data feedback from the community about what is missing and what is lacking?
We do not. You know, we hear the same feedback that you do, kind of anecdotally. People would really like a high beat at the hub. And they would
Here it's coming.
like a brewery. And they like the small restaurants and cafes. We do hear that. I think that, well, one of the first things that we identified in the strategic plan was a downtown strategy. And as part of that, what we've identified is that we don't actually know the makeup of the businesses in Richfield. We don't know what's here. I couldn't tell you how many restaurants there are, how many local restaurants there are. And so I think that that's maybe the place to start, is looking at what we have and doing some sort of actual business survey, which is going to require staff going out and doing a physical count. And then as we start to develop programs, maybe we do solicit feedback from the community. But I think it would be good to know what we have first.
Yeah.
To know if, yeah.
I think a lot of that touches on that communications piece. For staff to think about how they can communicate to and about the businesses better, and that's a piece of it. Is community tell us, you know, what the perfect business environment would look like. You know, what's lacking in the community that you'd like to see more of. You know, are there any deserts here?
I know the Star Tribune has had a couple of articles recently. One regarding this kind of need for mid-sized warehouses. There's a whole kind of work done at looking at like there's not enough. It's either lots of open warehouse space in the county or very small businesses for retail space, right? There's kind of that mid-manufacturing space that's really missing. And then of course there was also the article about legal rights that came through recently. And you know, the commentary in there of the perceived cost that rents are too high here for these type of businesses. And I think it would be really good to understand like what businesses are here, but like what is the average rent cost by type or space even exists, right? And that goes back to like the communication piece of what is our average cost? How does that compare to other communities? Is there a need for us to do something different there? Are we losing out to other places or are we not? Is this just the business environment that's here? I think about the money we've squirreled away, that is probably a good place to start, is this kind of baseline understanding so we can actually set goals and see where we want to go after those. Are some really super specific questions?
just one thing I want to say is first, thank you, because this was amazing, all of this data and this information. And I was thinking about similar along the lines you are, that if we're helping the small businesses, we're building wealth within the community. And it also is one thing I want to look at is I want to make sure if we're going to be encouraging and subsidizing businesses, I'm hoping that they be higher wage businesses instead of like a really minimum wage, a chain that's coming in and paying minimum wage. I would rather focus on like a smaller business, but that's paying its workers and generating wealth for the community and generating wealth for the people that live here, that work here. And so I don't know the answer to all that, but I want to throw that out there, that we think about the well-being of the community as well.
Yeah, and that is something you can, if you have forgivable loan programs or grant programs, that you can have some say over, some control over. Where it gets more difficult is the monitoring of it. And so you just have to think through that with staff, how you, and there might have to be some, the good is better than perfect sometimes.
The bike rack campaign. When new businesses come in, do we require bike racks now?
We
Everything
do.
new. So realistically, the money that's left in that pool would just be existing businesses.
Yes, and we do market that. Yes, I think though, if a new business was coming in and said that, and that was something that they were struggling to afford, putting in the bike rack, I don't think it is limited to existing. I'd have to reread those.
No, I think that's the case.
Yeah.
But they're required to, but.
It's a requirement, but when a new small business comes in and says, we're taking over this space, and we say, that's great, you're renovating this space, you're gonna need to do X, Y, and Z. One of the things you need to do is a bike rack. We do have a bike rack grant program, if that's something you need.
I was also wondering, I know we have a strong bike community. Have we reached out to them to say, where are bike racks needed? That we could then specifically go after those businesses and say, your biking community has requested this. We also have some funding to help. Maybe there isn't, right? But
Yeah, and I haven't been very intentional. I have suggested that people tell their favorite business this is available. But just to be clear, are we still spending now this initial 5,000, or do we have 5,000 a year available?
It's still the,
Okay, but if we ran out, do we intend to budget 5,000 a year, or is it after it's gone, it's gone?
Since we've had this money sitting around for so long, I don't know what John's thoughts were, but since we've had it sitting around for so long, I don't think unless we saw this great need that we would continue to budget for it.
Okay.
I would imagine if it went down to zero, it'd be worth calling somebody over that deals with SHIP and saying, how hard would it be to get another X $1,000?
Yeah. I guess so my question's harder if there's this finite amount of money versus this being annual needing, but does it have to go? I'm thinking specifically, I asked a small business and they're like, well, we have a big commercial landlord, they don't want to deal with this, so we can't put it on our property. Can they could they use this program to put something in the right of way, like with visible over feature?
We did change the rules about where you can install a bike rack now, and it does allow the installation in the right of way. So I think that's a good question. If the grant program is written in a way that would allow that, I'd have to look at the specifics.
Okay.
If it says it has to be within the boundaries.
I don't
or
think
if it's
there's that level of specificity
Yeah.
to it.
I think it's-
I don't know how common that is, but it seems like potentially that's a way around a property owner that just doesn't want to be bothered with it.
It's installing in the right of way.
The displaced business, it not being utilized, do we know, we know the businesses that have been displaced, right, and ones that have moved. Was it not utilized? It wasn't enough money, it wasn't needed?
Some of the businesses moved out of Richfield. It was only available if you were relocating within Richfield.
That wasn't enough to entice them to stay.
Right. Some of them couldn't find space. Yeah, that wasn't enough to make space affordable. The intention was that it would help you to move to a new space. It wasn't that it was going to cover your rent differential. The project that we set it up for The rents were so far below market rents. The developer's broker was helping tenants try to find space, and it was very hard.
In Ridgefield or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Oh.
I mean, the rents were so low. They were paying no common area rent.
In the existing building?
Mhm.
Oh, yes, I recall that.
Some of them actually weren't paying rent.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, $3,600 was not gonna. Then there were a couple that relocated within Ridgefield that did not apply for the money, and I don't know the reason.
But a couple did use it.
Yes, yes.
And, this is, I was obviously a staff person when that was created. And at the time, we said there was nothing magic about the $3,600. It was, we talked about how we arrived at that number, that it could be a different number. It just depended on, the budgetary capabilities of the EDA.
And so it's the thought that we would discontinue that program because it wasn't used well in the past, or that there's unlikely to be eligible candidates in the foreseeable future?
My recommendation is kind of just have it in your back pocket, that staff knows when a redevelopment project is going to come along. If you knew a project was going to happen in 2024 that was going to displace businesses, then it would show up in the budget. If in 2025 staff didn't foresee that happening, it might not show up in the budget, but you do have the cash reserves that if something unexpected were to happen, it's there.
And we do a revised budget partway through the year, so it's something that could be added in.
We better head over. Thank you. And I think we can continue this conversation about all the good work and stuff.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Having me.
Good job.